April 1945. The Third Reich, a regime built on terror and delusion, was in its death throes. As American forces pushed deeper into Germany, they encountered not only the remnants of a shattered military, but the horrifying truth of a nation consumed by its own darkness. This is a somber journey into the final days of Nazi Germany, a critical lesson in the consequences of unchecked power, and a testament to the enduring importance of historical memory. The spring of 1945 witnessed the relentless advance of the United States Army across Western Germany. This was not merely a military campaign, it was the systematic dismantling of a totalitarian state, piece by agonizing piece. American divisions, hardened by years of combat, moved eastward with an unstoppable momentum, their objectives clear: to crush the remaining Nazi resistance and liberate the occupied territories. Cities and towns, once vibrant centers of German life, now lay in ruins, their infrastructure shattered by Allied bombing and the fierce, often futile, last-ditch resistance. The landscape itself bore the scars of a war that had consumed a continent. Smoke still rose from bombed-out factories, and the silence in many villages was broken only by the distant rumble of tanks. The Wehrmacht, once a formidable fighting force, was a shadow of its former self. Though Hitler's March 11th order demanded resistance to the last man, the reality on the ground was one of widespread demoralization and collapse. Supply lines had disintegrated, leaving soldiers without food, ammunition, or hope. Many units, cut off and surrounded, chose surrender over senseless sacrifice. Thousands of German soldiers, from seasoned veterans to hastily conscripted teenagers, laid down their arms in places like Borden and Mu. Their surrender was often met with a mixture of relief and exhaustion, both from the Allied troops and the German civilians who, desperate for peace, sometimes shared their meager rations with the prisoners. The war for these individuals was unequivocally over. The fall of Frankfurt, a strategically vital city, epitomized this collapse. American infantry moved block by block through its devastated streets, encountering pockets of fanatical resistance alongside widespread capitulation. Lieutenant Colonel Lehler, a German officer, famously urged his men to fight on, believing they must not hinder their leader's final card. His defiance, however, was short-lived. He was killed by American artillery, and his men subsequently surrendered. This period marked a profound shift in the nature of the conflict. It was no longer a war of maneuver on open battlefields, but a grim house-to-house struggle against a dying regime. The sheer scale of the surrenders and the visible disintegration of German authority underscored the futility of continued resistance, even as the Nazi leadership clung to their delusional fantasies of victory. As the Allied armies advanced deeper into Germany, they began to uncover the horrific truth of the Nazi regime's atrocities. What started as a military campaign transformed into a mission of liberation, revealing the unspeakable suffering inflicted upon millions. The first glimpses of these horrors came in unexpected places, often in transit camps or satellite facilities. In Wetzlar, US troops stumbled upon a transit camp for Allied prisoners of war. While many of these POWs had survived, albeit barely, their emaciated forms and the conditions of their captivity offered a chilling prelude to the systematic extermination camps that lay further east. The discovery of these camps forced the liberators to confront the true nature of the enemy they had been fighting. The full scale of Nazi depravity became horrifyingly clear at sites like Holzen, Mittelbau-Dora, and most infamously, Buchenwald. American soldiers, many of whom had witnessed the brutality of combat, were utterly unprepared for the scenes that awaited them. These were not battlefields, but death factories, places where human beings were systematically starved, tortured, and murdered on an industrial scale. The final days before liberation were often the most brutal. Fleeing SS guards in a desperate attempt to erase evidence of their crimes abandoned prisoners to die of starvation, disease, or summary execution. In Nordhausen, over 2,000 corpses lay unburied in the ruins of the Bolke barracks, a testament to the final desperate acts of cruelty. A seasoned GI, a veteran of Normandy, later recounted the profound shock. "We were hardened men, but this made us sick to our bones." The psychological toll on the liberating soldiers was immense. They were confronted with the stark reality of genocide, a crime against humanity on an unprecedented scale. The images, the stench, the emaciated survivors, all left an indelible mark, forever altering their understanding of human evil. These experiences would shape their lives and contribute to the global understanding of the Holocaust. In a deliberate act of public education and accountability, Allied commanders forced German civilians to confront the atrocities committed in their name. In Weimar, a city just miles from Buchenwald, 1,000 local residents were marched to the camp and compelled to witness the horrors firsthand. They saw the crematoria, the piles of emaciated bodies, the shrunken heads, and the tattooed skin of victims. Their reactions varied from weeping and fainting to outright denial. "We didn't know," they cried, a common refrain that rang hollow against the backdrop of years of propaganda, persecution, and the ever-present smoke from the crematoria. This forced viewing was a crucial step in dismantling the collective denial and beginning the long, painful process of confronting Germany's complicity and responsibility. It was a stark lesson in the dangers of willful ignorance and the moral imperative to bear witness. Even as the Third Reich crumbled around them, the Nazi leadership clung to a desperate, almost insane, belief in ultimate victory. This delusion led to increasingly desperate measures, sacrificing the lives of their own citizens in a futile attempt to stave off the inevitable. The conscription of boys born in 1928, mere 16-year-olds, to face battle-hardened American Sherman tanks stands as a tragic testament to this madness. These child soldiers, often poorly trained and equipped, were thrown into the maw of modern warfare. Many died within hours of reaching the front lines, their lives extinguished before they had truly begun. Others were captured, dazed and silent, their youth stolen by a regime that demanded their ultimate sacrifice for a lost cause. Camps like Meisenheim swelled with 50,000 such prisoners, many without adequate food or water under the harsh spring sun, a stark image of the regime's utter disregard for human life. Yet, amidst this widespread desperation and fanaticism, some towns and individuals chose dignity over delusion. Their actions offered a glimmer of hope and a stark contrast to the regime's destructive path. These acts of defiance, though localized, were crucial in mitigating further destruction and saving countless lives. In Halle, a remarkable act of courage unfolded. Count Felix von Luckner, a celebrated World War I naval hero, led a delegation of citizens to meet the advancing Americans, waving white flags of surrender. He defied the SS commander's threat, "This will cost you your heads," a threat that, had it been carried out, would have plunged the city into a bloody, pointless battle. Luckner's bravery spared Halle from the fate of many other German cities, demonstrating the power of individual moral courage in the face of tyranny. The internal chaos within Germany was palpable. In Gera, desperate women looted food, a sign of the complete breakdown of civil order and the desperate struggle for survival. Diaries from the period paint a vivid picture of the disintegration. "The city is Babylon now. There will never be peace again." This sense of profound loss and uncertainty permeated society, yet even this chaos felt preferable to another day under the oppressive and destructive grip of the swastika. These contrasting narratives The regime's fanatical last stand versus the pragmatic and courageous actions of civilians highlight the complex and often contradictory realities of Germany's final days. They underscore the human cost of ideological extremism and the enduring spirit of those who, even in the darkest hours, sought to reclaim their humanity and their future. The final battles for Germany's cities were not just military engagements, they were symbolic struggles for the soul of a nation. In Nuremberg, the very heart of Nazi ideology and the site of its infamous rallies, fanatics clung to their dying cause with a desperate ferocity. US troops fought through the city's ruined streets, encountering fierce resistance from SS units and fanatical elements of the Volkssturm. Karl Holz, the Nazi Gauleiter of Nuremberg, personified this fanatical resistance, personally leading attacks against the American forces. His death in a cellar marked the end of an era of absolute Nazi control in the city. The battle for Nuremberg was a grim reminder that even as the regime collapsed, its most ardent followers remained committed to its destructive ideology until their last breath. The atrocities continued even in the face of overwhelming defeat. In Leipzig, the mayor Karl Goerdeler chose to commit suicide alongside his family rather than face the consequences of the city's surrender. This act of despair was followed by an even more heinous crime. Nazi loyalists set fire to a shack containing 300 prisoners, many of whom were political dissidents or forced laborers. Those who managed to escape the flames were brutally shot down. These horrific events were not hidden. US Army cameramen accompanying the advancing troops meticulously recorded everything they witnessed. These images, raw and unedited, would later become crucial evidence in the Nuremberg trials, providing irrefutable proof of the Nazi regime's war crimes and crimes against humanity. They served as a visual testament to the depths of depravity to which the regime had sunk, even in its final moments. The scenes of children wandering among the rubble, their faces etched with confusion and fear, offered a poignant counterpoint to the fanatical resistance. These were the innocent victims of a war they did not start, their futures irrevocably shaped by the destruction around them. The images of Nuremberg in flames and Leipzig in ruins were not just snapshots of military victory, they were stark visual indictments of the human cost of unchecked power and ideological extremism. The reckoning for these crimes was just beginning. The systematic documentation of atrocities, the capture of key Nazi figures, and the eventual establishment of international tribunals would lay the groundwork for a new era of international justice. The echoes of these final battles and the horrors they revealed would resonate for decades, shaping global understanding of war crimes and the imperative to hold perpetrators accountable. Even in its final, desperate throes, Nazi Germany clung to fantastical notions of secret weapons and impregnable fortresses that would turn the tide of the war. These delusions, propagated by Hitler and his inner circle, served to prolong the conflict and sacrifice countless more lives. The reality, however, was far grimmer and more pathetic than the propaganda suggested. In Lower Saxony, US troops discovered modified V-1 rockets, not for strategic bombardment, but for suicide pilots. This desperate plan, a chilling echo of Japanese kamikaze tactics, underscored the regime's willingness to expend human life in a futile attempt to achieve a mythical victory. These were not weapons of triumph, but instruments of despair, revealing the ultimate bankruptcy of Nazi military strategy. The much-vaunted Alpine fortress, a supposed impregnable redoubt in the mountains where Hitler and his loyalists would make their last stand, was another such myth. Intelligence reports suggested a formidable stronghold, potentially drawing Allied forces into a protracted and bloody mountain campaign. General Eisenhower, however, saw through the deception. Recognizing it as a trap designed to divert Allied resources, he wisely chose to turn his forces south, avoiding needless slaughter and focusing on the true centers of German power. The reality of the Alpine fortress was a collection of scattered, poorly organized defensive positions far from the impenetrable bastion of Nazi propaganda. This strategic decision by Eisenhower saved countless Allied lives and accelerated the collapse of the German resistance, demonstrating the importance of clear-headed assessment over succumbing to enemy psychological warfare. The war also saw moments of personal drama and miscalculation. At Hammelburg, American troops found Colonel John Waters, General Patton's son-in-law, among Yugoslav prisoners. This discovery was a direct consequence of a failed rescue attempt 10 days earlier, a daring but ill-conceived raid ordered by Patton himself. The camp had been nearly emptied by the Germans after the raid, leaving Waters and a few others behind. Patton's gamble, driven by personal loyalty, had almost cost more lives than it saved, highlighting the fine line between audacious leadership and reckless endangerment in wartime. These incidents, from the V-1 suicide rockets to the Alpine fortress myth and the Hammelburg raid, collectively illustrate the chaotic and often irrational nature of the war's final days, where desperation and delusion often overshadowed strategic reality. April 25, 1945, marked a pivotal moment in the final chapter of World War II in Europe. On this historic day, two armies, born of vastly different ideologies and fighting for distinct futures, met at the Elbe River. US General Reinhardt, representing the Western Allies, crossed the river in a Russian rowboat to shake hands with General Rusov, commander of Soviet forces. This symbolic meeting, widely publicized, signaled the physical division of the Third Reich and the imminent end of the war. The world watched, hopeful that this convergence of forces would usher in an era of lasting peace. The Third Reich, once a seemingly unstoppable force, had been cut in two, its heartland now a battleground for the converging Allied powers. This meeting at the Elbe was not just a military milestone, it was a powerful symbol of the Allied unity that had ultimately crushed Nazi Germany. That same day, deep within his bunker in Berlin, Adolf Hitler finally conceded the inevitable. He told his remaining staff that the war was lost, a stark admission from a man who had plunged a continent into unprecedented conflict. Within 5 days, he would be dead by his own hand, bringing a definitive end to his tyrannical reign and the Nazi regime. The silence that followed the Elbe meeting, and indeed the end of the war, was not an empty one. It was a silence pregnant with the weight of immense loss, profound suffering, and the daunting task of rebuilding a shattered world. President Truman's hopeful words about peace outlasting war were tempered by the grim reality that not everything lost could be reclaimed. Millions of lives had been extinguished, entire cities reduced to rubble, and the moral fabric of a continent deeply scarred. Not every witness to the atrocities survived to tell their story, and not every wound, physical or psychological, would ever truly heal. The end of the war was not a simple return to normalcy, but the beginning of a long, arduous process of reckoning, remembrance, and reconstruction. The Elbe meeting, therefore, stands as a complex symbol of victory and unity, but also of the profound and lasting consequences of a war that reshaped the world. We remember the final spring of 1945 not merely as a moment of military victory, but as a profound historical mirror. It reflects the terrifying consequences of unchecked hatred, the insidious nature of totalitarianism, and the devastating impact of collective silence. This period serves as an enduring lesson in what can happen when a society succumbs to extremist ideologies and abandons its moral compass. The images of shattered cities, emaciated survivors, and the sheer scale of human suffering are not just historical footnotes. They are a stark warning. They remind us that history is not a passive record, but an active teacher, constantly urging us to learn from the past, to safeguard the future. The atrocities uncovered, the lives lost, and the moral compromises made during this period underscore the fragility of peace and the constant need for vigilance against the forces of intolerance and oppression. Buried beneath the rubble of 1,000 towns, beneath the white flags of surrender, and beneath the ashes of the crematoria lies an undeniable truth. The past is not simply a story to be told, but a lesson to be absorbed. History didn't just record the events of 1945, it wept through them, bearing witness to the depths of human cruelty and the resilience of the human spirit. This somber reflection compels us to engage with history, not as a distant narrative, but as a living, breathing testament to humanity's capacity for both destruction and redemption. It challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths, to understand the mechanisms of genocide, and to recognize the importance of individual and collective responsibility. The echoes of 1945 resonate still, urging us to remember, to learn, and to act. The final spring of 1945 brought an end to the European theatre of World War II, but it marked the beginning of a new era of historical reckoning. The lessons learned from the collapse of the Third Reich are not confined to textbooks. They are vital for understanding contemporary challenges and for fostering a more just and peaceful future. For history buffs, students, educators, and researchers alike, this period offers an inexhaustible wellspring of knowledge and a profound call to action. The meticulous documentation of these events, from military strategies to the testimonies of survivors, provides invaluable insights into human behavior under extreme duress. It underscores the importance of critical thinking, media literacy, and the courage to speak out against injustice. The legacy of 1945 demands that we remain vigilant against the resurgence of hate, prejudice, and authoritarianism in any form. The work of memory is never truly finished. It requires continuous engagement, critical analysis, and a commitment to preserving the truth, however painful it may be. By studying this period, we honor the victims, learn from the mistakes of the past, and equip ourselves to build a future where such horrors are never repeated. Was this justice or silence by design? The question remains a powerful prompt for reflection. Share your thoughts below, engage in respectful dialogue, and consider how the lessons of 1945 continue to shape our world today. Your participation in this ongoing conversation is crucial to ensuring that the echoes of truth from a world at war continue to resonate, guiding us toward a more informed and compassionate future. Echoes of truth from a world at war. What historical lessons from the collapse of the Third Reich do you believe are most vital for future generations? Share your insights in the comments below and consider subscribing for more in-depth historical explorations.